Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. George Russell with some strong words for his rivals going into the upcoming season, saying he is ready to take the title, challenge to Max Verstappen and Red Bull, to the McLaren boys, to the Ferrari boys, and maybe if necessary to his own teammate Kimi Antonelli. Will Mercedes have the car to make this happen? Does Russell have the skill to make this happen? Those are the two key questions of the day. Very much interested in your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new as always. Starting with the following, it's been 60 days since Formula 1 has gone, and it's not that far until it's back in business, right? It's the 18th of February, in a couple of weeks, less than that actually now, when all the cars are going to get revealed. A day after that, we're going to start to see many of the shakedowns, the teams properly revealing their car, and then a couple of days after that, we are in Bahrain for testing. Yuki Tsunoda, this is likely to be, I'd say it's certainly possible, his final year of testing in the Red Bull family. It's quite clear that if he's not getting the drive now, he's not going to get the drive. Look, there is a world where Lawson is horrific for the start of the season and Red Bull decide, you know what, we made a mistake, Yuki, you can get the drive. Just seems doubtful to me because, well, you can even see it on the hat, can't you, the Honda. And let's be honest, Yuki seems to be more of a Honda driver than a Red Bull driver. That's certainly how they treat him, and Honda are moving, of course, to Aston Martin. And Tsunoda knows if this time, when Perez was underperforming and was then fired, he wasn't signed, he's probably never going to get signed to the main Red Bull team. So he's got to look at alternatives. There are some other interesting candidates. Aston Martin probably would be the one that he would like to go to because of the potential upside, but Lance Stroll probably isn't going anywhere. And when Alonso eventually retires, which he may never do, but assuming he does, you know, it's likely they will want a real heavy hitter in that car. So, kind of tough to see where Tsunoda might go. Alpine is not impossible, but they are seemingly committed to Gasly and Colapinto, which is pretty funny because Gasly and Colapinto are not their two drivers right now, but they may be very shortly, especially because as of yesterday, many of the teams were doing testing for Pirelli at the circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya, and, well, this is Franco Colapinto getting into his Alpine, not Jack Doohan, right? So, like, you couldn't make this stuff up, could you, really? This is apparently via Flavio Briatore's Instagram, so I don't think he could be making it any more obvious that Briatore's, well, intention is to get Colapinto into that Alpine car for 2025 as soon as is feasibly possible. It may just be a couple of races in, it may be half a season in, we don't really know, but it's likely not to be a full season for Jack Doohan based on the evidence that we have seen. So yeah, feel bad for Doohan, to be honest, with how this whole thing is going. We've also got to finalise what's happened with Ferrari over the last couple of days. This is the Barcelona circuit, this of course being the main straight. Here's Hamilton, the number 44 Ferrari SF24, and yesterday and the day before, they did lots of testing over the last couple of days for Pirelli. Now, Pirelli decide what the teams will do. The teams can still take advantage of the opportunity to test. They, of course, will get their own data and they can decide which cars and what setup they want to test with to try and maximize their learning. But fundamentally, Pirelli say, okay, these are our new 2026 tyres of the various compounds, right? Like, you know, C1 to C5, more than likely, thinner than the tyres we've used for the last couple of years and will use this year. And Pirelli basically say, okay, you're going to do this many laps and these are the numbers that we're going to try and collect. This is what you're going to run. This is what you're going to run. Now, of course, yesterday we talked about these lap times here that were discussed. Hamilton did 87 laps. His best was a 1:59. Leclerc did 86 laps. His best was a 1:16.0. And as I said yesterday, there's nothing too much to read into these lap times, only that the fact that they were very close potentially showed that at least at some point during the sessions for the both respective drivers, they were on relatively similar setups or the same tyre or whatever, right? It's very difficult to say, but that's the only way you can read anything into these numbers, is if they're relatively similar, given that the drivers should be relatively similar in like skill and performance, then it might imply that they were representative. It may not, like that's the whole point, and clearly the lap times of yesterday were not representative. Either that or Hamilton has gone from being, you know, right on Leclerc's pace, if not slightly faster, to completely washed up in the matter of 24 hours, which obviously is not the case. But Hamilton and Leclerc yesterday did 74 laps each, and this is their best time. Obviously, what's more interesting is like the actual lap times. It would be great if we would know, you know, what tyre compound they were on, what the conditions were at the time, what the fuel load was. You know, there was talk still about the fuel load being, well, people did some calculations. Brake Booster talked about it again, saying that based on some calculations, instead of 70 kilos of fuel, it's actually likely to be more like 82 kilos. And the teams may run extra fuel as well so they can regenerate the electrical hybrid power unit from just running the engine, which is a rumour on what they're going to do, which is pretty stupid. But, you know, these upcoming regs are pretty stupid as far as I'm concerned. But these are the times. Piastri was in the car all day yesterday, as was Lando the day before. His fastest was a 1:15.8. Leclerc did what is a pretty competitive lap time with a 1:14.9. So presumably that was on one of the, quicker, softer sets of tyres, shall we say, on a lap where Leclerc was presumably pushing with a lap time like that around Barcelona, Hamilton's lap being, 1.8 seconds off. But it's very plausible with differences between the times like this that Hamilton was on a very different run plan with very different compounds of tyres, and maybe even Ferrari wanted to learn different things from his session than they did for Leclerc. But still, good lap time from Leclerc. Piastri was a 1:15.8, and of course, notably, what was probably most interesting about this whole couple of days, really, was obviously Hamilton getting loads of laps in the most recent Ferrari, but equally the drivers getting the opportunity to test out old cars. And for Ferrari, that was last year's car, which is a pretty big deal because I think Aston Martin, they chose the 2022 car and McLaren chose the 2023 car. So you might understandably be asking, okay, why when you can use the most recent model? What the teams have tried to do is replicate as much as they can the most recent regulations that will be similar to 2026. It's pretty clear that the amount of downforce the cars are going to generate is going to be, maybe 20% less, maybe 40% less. Like, these are some of the numbers that are being thrown around for 2026. So the teams have taken an approach where they've dialed out a lot of the downforce. They want a car that is going to replicate 2026 so they can test the tyres on it. That's the idea. So McLaren were using the 2023 car, the MCL 60, with a bit more front wing, whereas Ferrari used the most recent car, but with very little front wing and very little rear wing. The reason, as Duquesne actually describes here, that Ferrari went for the most recent version, because of course, if you choose an older car, it's got less downforce, so you might theorize that it could be better in some respects for testing for 2026. But for Ferrari, their feeling was that the SF23, which Hamilton first drove, and of course he put it in the wall in his first test with the team at Barcelona, it's actually not Duquesne, it's Rosie Giuliana here and Donna Doney, so shout out these guys instead. But Duquesne is usually the one tweeting out the articles and stuff. But they put this article together on autoracer.it, and they talked about how the Ferrari, the SF23, is old, it's problematic, and certainly when you're talking about tyre data collection, it's not going to give you the most consistent numbers, both in terms of operating window and compound cooling, as well as suspension dynamics, was quite far from the current references. So McLaren, they decided to use the MCL 60, but as a mule car with a couple of different components. So it seems a couple of reasons why Ferrari decided to go this direction with their car that they chose, and maybe one of them is just at least giving Hamilton an opportunity to drive the most recent Ferrari, which will still be very different to the upcoming Ferrari, but will be the most similar that you can possibly get. So obviously some talk about the programs and the significance of the lap times and all that type of stuff. I think the bottom line is the next time we're going to see these guys take to the track is going to be in a couple of weeks on the 19th of February. So less than 2 weeks, we are going to get the shakedown of the Ferrari SF25. That's when the eyes are really going to be peeled for what this car's going to look like. The 18th of February is the day where the F1 75 event happens at the O2 Arena in London. They reveal all the cars, but I guarantee that at least 8 of the teams, probably all 10, will not show you the real car. It will be last year's car with the new livery, and some of the liveries will be nice, some will not be so nice. It is what it is. This is Formula 1. But from the day after, that's when Ferrari have said, yeah, we're not letting F1 steal our thunder. Like, we are going to announce that we're going to reveal our own car for real on the following day. And when they do so, they'll then get Hamilton and probably Leclerc out on the track in the SF25 at Fiorano for the first time as they have done before, and it's been a big song and dance in the media. So that's the timeline there. The testing at Barcelona is now done. Next stop is actually Jerez. Alpine, McLaren and Mercedes are going to be there, testing out some Pirelli tyres as well. So pretty interesting developments. It does seem that the limit on the filming day is 200 kilometers, and that'll be split evenly between the two. So they will do a fair few laps around Fiorano, but 100 kilometers each. It's not a massively substantial amount of laps around that circuit, but it's, solid enough for the February 19th launch day. That will be revealed for the first time then. How similar will it look to this Ferrari? Probably quite similar. It will be red. There will be some HP logos stickered on it more than likely, but it will be a different red, and it will have a very different front suspension geometry. That is our current understanding, among many other things as well. Let's talk though about Mercedes, because they confirmed today their new race suits. This is what they look like. I think they're kind of nice. I mean, they're black, they're a bit of silver on them, and then you've got these kind of Petronas blue dots or hexagons or whatever on the right hand side, and Antonelli's got the Petronas blue IWC. I don't know if I have to call it that, whatever. I don't know why I'm giving Mercedes sponsors so much credit here, but here they are in their new overalls, and this picture I thought was quite funny, right? Like, it doesn't, I mean, look at the way they're smiling. It doesn't have the same energy maybe as last year's driver pairing had. So look, these guys, talented drivers, absolutely. We'll see what they deliver this new season, but I thought, Russell looked kind of goofy in this one, Antonelli in the other side of the team kit as well. So these are the pictures coming out today from Mercedes, and they will be getting in the car soon enough as well. Mercedes are saying some interesting things about their car. They're not gassing it up too much, but George Russell is very clear that he believes this is going to be his year to potentially do some serious damage. I feel like many teams feel the same way. There was a kind of exclusive Sky Sports interview here with George Russell that came out today, where he was talking about just wanting to get back to racing, but also was asked the question, like, where will Mercedes be this year? Could this be the year for them to get back to form? They are taking a different approach to the other teams. Red Bull, I mean, who really knows? Red Bull are in a tough spot because it seems that they spent so much time on their front wing flexibility development, they might not have much time left for much else, which is a bit of a problem when your car was a bit of a disaster last year, at least towards the end of the season. McLaren and Ferrari are both taking substantial risk, we understand, with their car to try and make sure that they beat the other team handily. What if both teams mess up? Because Mercedes are taking a much more seemingly conservative approach, where they take last year's car, they try and make it much more consistent, and then they put it on the track and hope that it's going to be more consistent across various Grand Prix types. That will never be fully true. There will be weekends where Mercedes are probably quite weak, but if they are significantly better on their bad weekends than they were last year, that's going to be a big selling point for them. So maybe it's time for Mercedes to get back to the top. I don't know. There was even Newey, I think, said that he was quite impressed by last year's Mercedes in some respects. It's just, in terms of consistency, it was nowhere near the mark of some of the other top teams. But Russell says that, look, if the car is there, if the car is competitive, he's absolutely ready to fight for the 2025 title. Russell firmly believes, and to be honest, I think every Formula One driver who's worth, any salt really, should believe that he can confidently beat Max Verstappen in the Red Bull if the time comes to it. I hope Lando Norris believes the same thing. I certainly know that Leclerc and Hamilton believe that at Ferrari, and maybe Piastri does as well. But, I think Lando last year, there were some questions on that. This year, Lando says that it's obviously going to be his turn to win the championship, and maybe he will. But Russell is, I think, a bit of an underrated driver. He did, over his tenure with Hamilton, I think he has done an excellent job. Certainly in 2023, he had his moments where he didn't look like the ready championship potential challenging driver. Too many problems in the races, too many errant, mistakes made with either the wall or with another driver. 2024, though, was actually much better for Russell. I think he was excellent the majority of the time. His domination of the Las Vegas Grand Prix weekend was equally impressive as well. And, he obviously got disqualified in Spa, but even then, that was still a good drive. And then it was, of course, Austria, where he was lucky, but he still put himself in position to capitalise. There's no doubt this is going to be a critical season for Mercedes to show that they've got to grips with ground effect going into yet another ground effect era going forwards. And maybe this is the year to try it, because in 2026, who knows? What if Aston Martin come along with the Honda engine powered by Aramco fuel, who are like, they're going to be the best fuel. Like, I think there's not much doubt. It sounds like fuel, why would fuel be a factor? And you wouldn't think it should be. But when you've got new regulations with new engines and new aerodynamics and new fuel, because it's going to be 100% sustainable fuel, and Aramco have been the ones making the fuel for Formula 2 already, they've got the experience here. There is actually quite a bit of talk right now that the Honda engine plus the Aramco fuel, that's going to be very effective. And Adrian Newey's design of the car, that's going to be very effective. So, there's lots of teams, I think, Ferrari, McLaren, Red Bull for Verstappen, and certainly Mercedes thinking maybe this is the chance. Maybe 2025 is the chance to get the win. Is Russell ready? I think he is, actually. I do think he is. I think if Russell was in this year's McLaren, last year's McLaren, he would have been more competitive than Lando. Is he consistent enough in terms of race pace? I'm not sure, especially because it's unlikely the Mercedes is going to be ahead of the other cars. If the Mercedes is equal to the other cars, Russell will have excellent weekends, but he probably won't be consistent enough to beat the likes of a Verstappen and obviously some of the other guys we've already mentioned, potentially the Ferrari duo as well. I think the doubtful thing to me is whether he actually has a competitive car, and it's also to some degree relevant on Antonelli, because I think there's expectations that Antonelli will have his good weekends, he'll have certainly his bad weekends. But I think also for Russell, he does have a fair bit to prove because, he needs to be, if the car is good, he needs to be competitive this season to prove that, Toto Wolff would make a mistake to drop him for Max. Because, the reality is I don't think Antonelli's going anywhere. They've invested too much into him to drop him after a single season, regardless of how well Antonelli performs next year, unless it's just a complete disaster. So, Russell really needs to do quite well and have a good internal team dynamic, because otherwise Toto might say we should get Max if Russell doesn't seem up to the task, if Max is potentially interested, as he may well be depending on the circumstances. If Russell proves that he can be, have another great season, potentially be a championship challenger, then maybe Toto will think it's not worth, destroying our internal team dynamics to get Max. But Toto Wolff has openly courted him for some time now, so that's certainly a discussion point. But enjoy your thoughts in the comments below. And there are plenty of drivers who will be free agents in the relatively near future. These are the drivers with contracts expiring end of 2026. I think the likes of Hamilton have +1 extensions and stuff that is possible. I think Russell's contract, though, actually ends at the end of this upcoming season in 2025. So there's some discussion to be had there on whether and when Mercedes will look to renew that contract, and it may well depend exactly on what we have heard him discuss over the last couple of minutes. But very much interested in your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.